Let's call to order. Roll call, please.
Nancy Kupka.
Present.
Trey Pavasich.
Here.
Mike Davenport.
Here.
Sherelle Fuller.
Here.
Dan Nicholas.
Here.
Rick Pavanato.
Here.
Don Renner.
Here.
Simone Black.
Here.
And Prevail Banga.
Here.
We have a quorum. Let's rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item of business is we need approval of the minutes from January 29th, the business meeting, and January 29th, the closed meeting.
I move that we accept my brain is just
Minutes
totally...
as stated?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Thank you. Trey Pavasich.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye. Rick
Rick Pavanato.
Aye.
Don Renner.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, the minutes pass. Thank you. This will be the first of two opportunities for comments from the audience. This first reception of visitors is intended for audience members to address the board about any agenda item on which the board will vote. Do we have anyone who wishes to address the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to recommendations and reports of the superintendent. Staffing and curriculum overview.
All right, we have some visitors joining us today to cover this topic. This is we used to do this in one special meeting. We've folded this into our regular open board meetings here. So this is the first of 3 times we'll visit this topic over this meeting and the next 2 meetings. Tonight we'll provide an overview of staffing for next year, an update on curricular offerings, and information on student services. The next 2 meetings we'll get into some more specifics, ultimately ending up with a final recommendation and hopefully approval by the board later in March. So I'm going to turn it over to Pete to take it from here and pass the torch around.
Okay, thank you. Couple of points of note for the board with the shift of the calendar this year. This has been an interesting situation for the buildings to try to get ready a little bit earlier with this kind of information for us, and that's partly why we're doing this a little bit piecemeal for you this evening. I would be remiss if I didn't make note of the time that Georgia Hash and Sarah Corrington, along with Ed and Janice, spent looking at all of the course requests, the sectioning, the meetings with department chairs, meetings here at the district office, working on all of this to get this together. There's a lot of hours that go into pulling all this information together for you. To start with, we are at a point in time right now where we have approximately 100 more students than we had a year ago at this time. And so we are recommending to be about 0.8 FTE above the line. Typically, 100 students would translate to about 1.0 FTE. So the buildings have done a nice job of really looking at things through a fine-tooth comb to get us to that 0.8. And you'll hear a little bit from Sarah and Georgia here in just a second about the kind of summary of the courses and how some of those things shook out. And I just want to let you know that we'll be bringing more information to you as we get closer to like the March 5th and March 19th board meeting. Scott will talk a little bit about the below the line FTE from his area, and we may have more to bring you on March 5th as well. So at this point, I will turn it over to Georgia and Sarah to give us a summary of the work that they did.
Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
We're going to start in the area of CTE. We're encouraged that our blended consumer enrollment has grown to 30 requests at North, and both sides of town have healthy enrollments in those sections. Our Project Lead the Way courses continue to grow. They have healthy enrollments across the buildings, and so do our engineering-related courses. Our culinary arts classes have grown so popular that if we could, we would run additional sections, but we don't have the kitchen space in order to do that. But we have, at this point, more requests than we're able to fill.
See? Should have done this years ago.
So last year at this time, we spoke to you about a new course that we were offering for semester course. We were offering to some freshmen and sophomores that needed some extra guidance kind of on doing school, some of that executive functioning stuff. We call that freshman seminar and sophomore seminar. And those courses have gone really, really well this year. I think we had just the perfect instructors on both sides of town for those courses. And next year at South, we're actually going to run an extra section of those courses. And when we were here last year, we said we weren't sure. We were going to start with one, knowing that we might need to go to two eventually. So that's gone really well.
The visual arts are very healthy. They're up by several sections at North, and we've grown a little at South as well. Our music courses are up slightly in both buildings, and we will run the rock band course that we talked about at South High. North next year will run AP Art History, which we have not run in a couple of years, so we're encouraged by that.
And as you would expect with the enrollment up, especially at South, math has gone up slightly, and science, you would see the mirror thing. The science sections have gone up as well. So PE, we are up slightly, and we're doing really well with the courses. Last year, you approved the personal trainer course and the self-defense course, and those courses have done really well. In the fall, when we came, we talked about changing the name of that advanced individual skill sports class. That class had kind of been on life support for a long time. And we changed the name to Gymnastics, Tumbling, and Fitness, hoping that we would give a better representation of what the class was actually about. And we weren't sure what would happen. We thought there's a possibility that kids will either not enroll or more will enroll. And we really didn't have any idea. But it was not the case. Actually, one less student enrolled this year. And so we decided, looking at all the needs in PE and all the different numbers, that rather than continuing to run a class that was about half full, we are not going to run that class next year. So that was really the main thing in PE.
Next year, our junior class is the first class with a civics requirement for graduation, and we suspected that our enrollment in the courses that satisfy those requirements would increase a bit, and they have. We've also seen some decreases in areas that don't fulfill that requirement, but we expect that that will level out over time.
And in world languages, both schools really are very stable. Very little change, a little bit, but nothing major in world languages.
At North High, we are going to be running all levels of reading support next year, including Strategies 3, Strategies for Academic Success 3, and that has not run in recent years, and we think that that is a change that is encouraging. It hasn't run due to low enrollment, and we attribute the fact that it is running due to the work of our chairs and our teachers to make sure we're connecting the students that need those supports with those services.
Those are the main things. So.
All right.
Very good.
And we'll turn it over to Gina to summarize some of the course.
Okay, as you can see, we have this year 10 courses that we are recommending for cancellation due to low enrollment. Some of them have not run in a year or two, so that's not necessarily surprising. That number is actually down from last year, so that's a good sign. There are 17 courses with enrollments of less than 20 that we are recommending for approval, and that's the same number as last year. On the memo that I wrote, I wanted to take a minute, though, to talk about Calculus 3. So Calculus 3 is a college-level course that's been offered here in the district for decades, perhaps, 13 years that I know of, and certainly long before that. And what it consisted of was North Central running the course in-house, a professor coming to either north or south, some years actually a section at each campus. And a great opportunity for our students, wonderful opportunity for our students. But as enrollment has declined in the course, they will not offer it for next year. They cannot support it next year. So spent a couple months looking at different options, and Lamont High School has been gracious enough, because they are running the course next year, to invite our students to take the course on their campus. It will run, they're on block scheduling, so it's a little bit different. It'll run every other day, first thing in the morning, 8 to 9:15, which will provide our students the time to get back to north or south for a third period. So we are still in the process of reaching out to the students. I had sent a letter, to the parents back in December, letting them know that we were looking into options. But right now, as of 4 o'clock today, we have 3 students that are confirmed. They will be driving to Lamont for the class. We have 3 that have opted not to. 2 I know for sure were not because of transportation. The third one I'm still going back and forth with the counselor on. And then 3 that are still having conversations with the counselors, with their parents, to determine if they would, like to have that opportunity.
Is there any way for them to carpool?
Some of them, I believe, will be, which is typically what's happened when Lamont students came to us years ago. So some years we had Lamont students come to us. This is actually the first time we're going to be going to them. So it's very possible that they will. And that's why I'm trying to find out the reason why any students who were recommended for the course do not sign up, what the reason is. Because I'm trying to determine if that is the reason, if transportation is an issue.
Are there any other colleges or universities that could do this for us?
So I've reached out to a couple and was not able to work anything out for next year. I do have a meeting scheduled with another university to find out what our options might be for the following year. But we needed to make decisions soon so students could plan for next year with their courses, and so this was the best option we have at this time.
And Gina, we will not provide transportation?
We did not offer transportation, and if we have a problem, if a student has a problem with transportation, then we will explore that issue.
Because this is a year-long class.
No, it's it actually is every other day, and it goes usually from about August 20th, so the start of the school year, until right before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
I'll get an exact schedule as time grows near. Even when it was run in our district, we didn't get a schedule this early. It was in the summer. We got the schedule. So it's every other day. So those students won't have a first or second period class on the opposite days.
Because it's essentially a college course.
It is a
which
college
taught
course.
Typically in our walls, but this time it will be in Lamont.
Right. And when it was taught here, it was every other day as well.
So what grade level is the student that generally take this? Am I getting this as a senior? Okay.
Seniors, and it's a very small group. These are students that are, a couple of years advanced in math. This is like a sophomore level college math course. This is after taking Calculus BC. So you'd have to be a junior in Calculus BC right now and be successful to even be recommended to take Calc 3.
And there's no way they can video conference into this course or?
Not this particular course through North Central. Some of the other things that I looked into, some of the other universities that I contacted, I asked about online courses. But
I'm not necessarily suggesting an online course as much as I am that they Skype or whatever in real time with the professor.
I can ask, but that was not what was offered.
Yeah, just to keep our students from traveling. It would be nice to know if that was even an option.
And how many seniors do you generally get that are interested in this class year over year?
It's gone down over the years. We have 9 students right now that could have possibly taken it. 3 are not taking it. 2 would probably not have taken it even if it was here in-house. When I was working with North Central, I knew of only 6 to maybe 7 students.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a diminishing thing because of Common Core implementation and how it changed the trajectory of so like my daughter this year had Calc 3, but she's in she was really in this last group. She got accelerated in middle school, so she could take geometry in her 8th grade and then so on. And so there's no way to get on that track anymore.
Gotcha.
Because of how it's structured and what's offered, at least in District 58. So we had, I think 58, actually, I mean, I know that year that Abby had geometry, there was like this, there was an enormous number of students actually.
Well, there were
that
like
pushed
32
forward.
in the
Right.
class this year.
And so you had this sort of, for a couple years, there was a lot of students kind of on that trajectory, and they
Right.
get, now, going forward, I mean, it's just not,
No, you can't get
you know,
there.
it's something that I had tried to work out for my freshman daughter right now, and just the logistics of trying to, the extra things you have to do to try to get there. And then in speaking to some of the math teachers and experts that I know, that really it's a nice thing that we've been doing, but I mean, it's really not, we're not really shortchanging. And the kids are getting a lot, and you remember how Common Core works, rather than waiting to introduce things are getting kind of introduced along the way now. So the students are still getting some of this exposure. And I will say it's exceptional, though, because when I took my daughter on some college visits, there were a couple places where they were like, I mean, she was told by the interviewer that in their 20 years or so of doing interviews, they had never had a high school student sitting across from them that was taking Calc 3 in high school. Wow. So I'm sure it happens at maybe University of Michigan or whatever. We were at some smaller liberal arts schools. So it's really kind of a great thing that we're doing. But the number, we're talking about three students, right?
Well, 3 that we have confirmed right now.
Right.
A few that we're still checking with.
7.
I'm just
7 at the
just to
6
point
to
out.
7,
I mean,
I think.
There's other classes that we have here in front of us. You know, we're talking about. You look at the number of students. That I mean, there's other things that they can do, and
There is, and we will watch those numbers. It's not like we're saying that, or that North Central's saying they would never come back and teach it in-house. That's simply not the case. We do have 3 of our sender schools that will now, within a year or 2, be teaching Math 2 to 8th graders.
okay.
So we may see that number increase, but that's going to take some time. And in looking at the numbers, you know, because I'm trying to back it up a year or 2 to see where we're at as I'm meeting with different universities to talk about this, it's hard to say because also you don't know if all students are going to be successful each step. So it's a little bit of a moving target for us right now, but due to the low numbers. But we're definitely having individual conversations with students to see if they're interested.
All right. Turn it over to Scott.
Scott.
Yeah, so I'm going to cover special services and CSSS and our safety, which is our campus security today, or tonight. So the first one for special services, we have at North High, we're seeing an increase of 1.2 FTE, and we're seeing it in the areas of co-teaching, multi-needs, and instructional programming. And then at South, we're seeing a 2.8 FTE increase. And again, that's in the multi-needs program, our supportive program, which is in our ED program, which is our emotional disabilities, and then in our instructional programming. And then the next one is our district FTE along with our transition program. We're actually going to be we're projected at 63 students next year at T99, which is the most we've ever had. We're currently at about 42, I think.
Wow,
So we're asking for an additional teacher to help support the program. And we're also asking for district FTE for a social worker, where we have been currently using Charlie's Gift, which is out of Hinsdale, as just a purchase service. So there's actually would be some savings in switching over and using district FTE with that. And then we're also looking to combine our assistive technology coordinator, our testing coordinator, and our building LEA, or district LEA, into actually 2 positions, and they would be a building LEA at North and South, and then they would handle all those responsibilities. And we're finding that will be more efficient and effective to support our students and be able to reach farther with that. And then we're still looking at it, but we do believe that there's an occupational increase for support for students, but we're only looking at that as like a 0.2, which actually is not a certified position, it's an exempt position, but I wanted to note that on there. One of the things that's nice about these increases, especially when you hear the words like multi-needs program and our supportive program and that, we're actually bringing back 15 students next year from outplacements between 6 at T99 and 9 at South High. And that's a great opportunity for those students, to be back in their home school and get support from the public system. But it's also fiscally a savings for us as well. So that will offset a little bit of the increases that we're seeing. And so overall, we are increasing from what we're currently running this year at 75.3 to 81.1 for next year for special services. And then for CSS, we're looking at North High to add a counselor, so one additional counselor, which will bring North High from 8 to 9 counselors for next year. And then we're looking to add some social work support at a 0.4. And then we're at South High, we're looking to increase social work support at a 1.0, and then a hospitalization position at a 0.4, which is something that we've seen an increase in our hospitalizations, and so we're trying to build some programming and interventions to support those students. So the CSS increase would be a 2.8 overall. And then safety for the campus security. This is the first year that we have campus security that are at both schools in that kind of role. So we're looking to add one at each campus. That will give us a little bit better coverage of different hours of the day, as well as at lunch, the front doors, and make sure that we're secure. They've been a wonderful addition, in my opinion, to our campus security overall plan and supporting our students and our staff in our buildings. So that would be a 2.0, and again, that's not a certified position, but I wanted to at least bring that to your guys' attention that it's a support staff role. Any questions? No, I went kind of fast.
And so remind me again, what's our student to counselor ratio at each of the high schools?
Well, the nice thing about this is that we'll be right around 250 to 1 at both schools. So we've been slightly off. We've been more than slightly off a little bit between north and south. So this will actually bring them pretty much even.
Brings it more.
Which is, I think, a really positive thing.
And that's sort of recommended by multiple professional organizations, is that's kind of the sweet spot that you want to be at. And a lot of research points to that's the right number, 250 to 1.
Okay, all right.
I talked to somebody recently who's at another high school, and they're over 300 to 1. I wonder how the sweet spot sounds great. I mean, from a parent point of view, I don't think we can have enough, actually. That's even, think about it, 250 to 1. But I'm wondering, in terms of a lot of our peer sort of districts in the area, how do we compare? Are most of them in the sweet spot, or are we actually doing a lot better there? Do you know?
We did look at that. We're actually, of districts that have 2 high schools, we're kind of like in the middle of all that. So, and even with this, we're still in the middle.
Okay.
I know that, and Nancy, I know you were at it last year when we did the board meeting in May, that we're going to be talking about actually of representation for this year of our parent-teacher advisory committee. I know that a lot of the families were talking about, how do we continue? They hear that many other schools have more social workers and counselors, and so we're really actually looking to continue to build our tier 2 and tier 3 interventions with this. So the counselors and our psychosocial workers run groups, provide individual support, consultation support, things like that, and so we're just looking to keep expanding that. We have had an increase in the hospitalizations. And, our 504 numbers have increased, which the case managers of that right now are, our counselors and our alpha teams. And so that does put extra caseload work on them and stuff like that. So that's why we're trying to, look at that balance of the 250 to 1. So.
Excellent.
What are the duties of a campus security personnel?
Well, I know that, so one of the nice things is we have our campus security trained in CPI, which is a crisis management training. So they are skilled in like de-escalation strategies. The CPI does do a physical management, but that's purely, we only use that if there's a safety issue in terms of a student either is going to be self-harming themselves or others. And then.
You call that physical management? Is that what you said?
Yeah, it's a physical management, yeah. I mean, special ed is trained in it as well, but we obviously don't want to use it, and we honestly hardly ever use it.
Wasn't familiar with that term
yeah.
in terms.
There's two trainings. There's a mentor training for physical management, de-escalation, and then CPI is the other one. But I think one of the things that I've seen with the presence of our staff is, I think at least for me, going into the buildings, I've seen with the campus security a bigger increase of their support and presence when people are entering the building. We had people in those positions before, but I've found that there's something about their presence now to me. I mean, they stop me when I walk in, even though I have my tag, which is great.
Right.
I'm okay with that. So, and then throughout the day, they're managing like the lunchrooms, which that's an area that we're kind of short in. So really their role is managing really the entire building for safety. And we're looking to have a little bit of flexibility to offer support after school as well. And it's a little difficult with the number we have right now and basically how we're kind of locked into the school day. So this would help us to be able to shift a little bit to have some after school campus support. So,
Mind if I follow up on your question?
yeah.
So these are people that are actually walking around?
Some are stationed, like we have obviously stationed at the front door, so that's their kind of role. And then, yeah, they're walking around, they're monitoring different areas of the building, lunchrooms, and that. So it's been a great support for us, I think, in terms of just security and being present and visible. They're all wearing the same uniform, which I think is
my next question.
I know, I think there was articles in the newspapers about it, but honestly, it's been a great, I think a great presence for us as a district to have it easily recognizable of who is actually our security staff in the buildings. So.
We'll come back, obviously, on March 5th, so if you come up, think of a question that we didn't answer for you, you'd like more information on, if you just let Hank know between now and March 5th, we'll come back ready to answer those as well.
When we get to the third installment, can we have like a really quick sort of kind of refresh on the first two installments?
Sheet that has everything on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know what, I just have one question, and I don't know if it's with this or another section.
Sure.
But the resource officers, to me, that would be under campus security, but
No, it's
maybe
a
not.
different categorization.
Okay, so
under
should I say
safety,
my
obviously.
question until then?
There's one per school, and that's a partnership between us and the police department.
Yeah, I know. When my children were in school, back in the dark ages, when the dinosaurs roamed the earth, we had two.
Right. because
In
we had
each
a
building.
partnership with Woodridge and with Downers Grove.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I don't think that's a bad idea to have two. With a building of 3,000 students and, 2,100 students,
I'm happy to go back to the administrative team and talk to them about it.
yeah.
I don't,
I mean-
we haven't had that conversation, so.
In light of everything that's been going on, I think sometimes having that presence there is also a secure thing.
It's also, it's the agreement with the police
I
department.
know,
so they
I
have to
understand,
have
I
an
understand
officer
that whole,
To loan us, so.
yes, I know.
But we can talk about we can have the conversation administratively and reach out to our partners and see if there's any interest.
It makes sense just to figure out if we're at the right level with this thing. is
Right,
all.
yeah.
Because you could have two, and then you could say, well, maybe three would be better, or maybe four. I mean, what do you, so the trick is what's
I
right
just
for
think
us.
looking at it isn't a bad thing. Because,
Do you know why we decreased the number? Money.
Well, I think what Hank was
Woodridge-
saying too, is that in
I think
terms of their,
Woodridge wanted to pull out.
right, their availability.
I don't know for sure.
It was money and, because they didn't want to hire an extra officer.
It was before my time.
I know, I know, I know. Like I said, the dinosaurs were roaming the earth.
Okay, any other questions?
All right, please, if anything pops into your head between now and Friday, let us know and we could get it here by Monday.
Board
Thank you.
representation?
Thank you, Sarah and Georgia.
Thank you very much. Board representation?
This is the meeting that Scott mentioned. It's the meeting he runs each year. I believe Nancy, you went to this
I went
one
to,
last year.
it was a very, very fascinating meeting, well-run meeting.
You know, we go through discipline policies and practices and present to a small group of parents and community members, and then get recommendations that then Scott brings back to the team out of that. So we need at least one board member, possibly two, but if we go on to three, it starts to become an official board meeting. So if we have one or two board members that would like to be interested, or are interested, you don't have to decide tonight. If you could let Nancy know in the next week.
Nancy, I'd be interested.
I'm interested too.
Okay, we got two.
Done? Okay, if you would let Nancy know now. Then Scott will coordinate with you to find an agreeable time.
This is perfect. The north and the south.
Perfect. Done.
Yep.
Thank you both.
Textbook.
All right, I'm going to turn this one over to Gina.
Okay. So every year I come to the board twice, actually, with textbooks. This is the first phase, which is to put the proposed textbooks on display. We have, as you can see, 6 textbooks. Do want to talk a little bit about these. It's a little bit different this year than it has been in the past. The first 3 that are on there, which come from our CTE department, will be class sets. We'll have a few additional, but primarily class sets. Our math BC Calc book is 10 years old. Current book is 10 years old, and the College Board strongly recommends that you have a new textbook every 10 years. So we really do not have much of a choice on that one. The discrete math book that we are proposing, and I think this is probably the oldest book that I've brought into the board, in probably 5 years, is obviously a copyright that's 3 years old. That book is a book that is used at COD. So next year, in our discrete math class, as well as another class, but specifically our discrete math class, we are embedding basically the targets, the learning targets, some of the content from a remedial college level math course at COD. The idea being, we're still going to teach our curriculum, but we're embedding it in there so that students will be prepared if they matriculate to COD or really any school for entry-level college credit bearing course in math. We have some parameters under which we're working, and we've been working on this for years, and it's finally coming to fruition, and there will be sort of a placement test involved, kind of a modified version. However, we feel it's important with this class to use the COD textbook. I will be asking you to adopt a book that is a few years old for that reason. We will probably only purchase it for a 1-year subscription to see how the course goes, to see how well it works within the course. It really is going to be a pilot for next year. So I know that's an older book. I wanted to point that out for you.
And Gina is kind of underselling the work that's been done with COD to get this course in place, along with our math chairs. So I think I know the board has heard me talk about this before, about sometimes that difficulty in transitioning from high school to college and some of the restrictions that are placed there with placement tests into math courses. We believe with this course, it's a sliding scale of the score based on the grade they get in the class. Our math chairs feel very strongly that they're attainable scores where they haven't always been there. So it's a very complex way of saying we've eliminated a lot of the single barrier of that single math test to go into credit-bearing courses. And the work that Gina and our 2 math chairs have done has been impressive, getting this in place. And there's 17 high schools across the DuPage County area that are also taking advantage of this as a result of that work. So they've been great leaders in the county in making this happen.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
That's great.
Thanks. And then the final book may look familiar to you. I brought this book to you last year, only it also had a copyright that was, I believe, 2 years old at the time. We were able to work out a deal with the publisher, with Cengage, that if we purchased the old copyright, because the new one wasn't going to be ready until January, till last month, they would replace them for free.
Oh.
So it's a new edition. Basically, and I did have, we went through a modified proposal, just like we do for, all of the books, but it was a little modified. The two teachers looked at the book to make sure that it still meets our needs, and actually, they said it's much better. It's got some updated information, there's some graphics that are better, and they've actually pulled out some information that wasn't part of our curriculum. So it's a little more condensed in that aspect. So it will be at no charge. However, it is a new copyright, a new edition, so we bring it to the board. So I am requesting that these 6 textbooks be put on display.
Now, are some of these available to go onto the Chromebooks so that they are not paper?
Yes. And actually, the first 2, the Goodhart Wilcox publisher does it in a very unique way, one of the ways that is unheard of, where you actually buy subscription and it's concurrent users. So I'm going to do class sets for those, even though in many, we have multiple sections, right? So if 30 students, as long as 30 students are in it at one time, we're okay. So that really opens lots of opportunities for us.
Good.
And then the physics books, I'd have to look back, but I think we bundled that one with the hard copy as well. And then discrete is only going to be online.
Okay.
And that's a 1 year, so I may be coming back next year. That's kind of the foreshadowing. I may be coming back next year with that one again.
So how do we put a book that's only online on display?
I have hard copies of the books.
That's also part of the reason why later in the policy portion of tonight, we're changing that policy for future years.
Yeah, but I do have the hard copies to put on display, so.
And when would these go on display after, assuming we approve?
Around 7:30 in the morning tomorrow.
Okay. I'm going to check out the architecture book. So.
You want to come back with me? I'll show you. I can bring it up in a few minutes, after the meeting.
All right.
And this will be on later tonight for approval to put them on display. When we come back at a later meeting to actually approve.
Anything else? Moving on to the amended calendar.
All right. One of the things, one of the topics that the board asked us to investigate about over a year ago was parent-teacher conference format, scheduling, timing, all of those things. So for the past year and a half, we've had a committee looking at our structure, how it works, is it meeting the needs of our families through a variety of different surveys, and it turns out that parents really like them. They like the structure of them. They feel like they're getting what they want out of them. The challenge is for our staff, right now it's a very long day of parent-teacher conferences back to back to back. Plus it's only one day, and if our parents have something with work on that day or those, it makes it challenging to carve out just a single day. So we looked at some other models that are out there, and what we're proposing to move to, and what the board would actually have to approve is the calendar that coincides with it, would be to move the way it sat on the calendar before was that October 17th all day would be conferences. What we're going to do is go to an early release on Thursday, a 1:30 release, with parent-teacher conferences starting at 3:30 in the evening and going till 8:30. And we stopped at 8:30 because in our data in the past, that's when parents stop signing up for them. So we'd end at 8:30, and then we resume the next morning from 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., giving folks maybe some time to come in before they go to work or those kinds of things. And then after conferences wrap up, teachers would be released. Students wouldn't come in on that 19th instead of the 7th. So with the calendar, it's just swapping the 17th with the 19th is the functional move that we're making tonight. But there's other mechanics that happen in there. Out of this work, we also heard concerns about students that get different teachers at second semester or trade courses. So out of that, we're working with the tech department to come up with a kind of a way to do an intro letter at the beginning or sheet at the end of each semester that talks about each teacher and how to get in touch with them, and maybe a little block about what the course is about type of thing, so that families have it all in one spot as to how to get in touch with teachers. So we hope that's kind of like a welcoming letter to each semester. So that's still in development, but it was a recommendation out of this committee to look at that. That way, if teachers or parents did want to set up conferences with teachers second semester frankly, anytime, or communicate electronically, this would give them the tools to arrange for that. So later on tonight is an item to approve that calendar.
Questions or comments?
Just saying, based on personal experience, the teachers have been phenomenal in addressing any type of needs parents or that I've had personally, and not be able to meet on certain days and meeting on other days. So yeah, they've been great with that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Because they want your child to succeed.
We all want.
Something that boggles me is the physical education exemption.
All right, so back to PE exemption.
It's back.
I have a question about the calendar.
Oh, yes.
Oh, sorry.
If we didn't have the emergency days, are we on the calendar, the proposed calendar?
Mm-hmm.
Would school be out on the before Memorial Day?
Yeah,
or-
just like this year. Yeah.
Okay, all right, same
Yep.
thing, okay.
Yeah, it almost mirrors this year's
Okay.
calendar. Exactly.
Since we haven't gotten there yet, I couldn't remember. Okay.
Yeah. All right, so PE exemption. So we came and started talking about this in January. Remember, this is all kind of folding in to go back in time here. August, Senate Bill 1947 changed, which expanded PE exemptions. It took until almost December to get a ruling from Illinois State Board of Education about what that language meant. So that meant we started getting it on your radar in January to say, hey, this is a thing we're going to be talking about. There was a lot of questions. We were still working on practice and those kinds of things. For the last, it's been a little over a month. Gina's been working a lot with Ed and Janice and our PE chairs to work through how the practices might work, because there was a lot of question about practice and how that would impact policy. We went to the policy committee to talk about policy, and they recommended we just bring it all here and cover the whole topic all at once. So Gina's going to go through a revised presentation from last time. We've provided you there's a document that shows the actual change in the law, this presentation, and then the change in the policy that we're recommending to go along with it. So with that introduction, I'll turn it over to Gina for a little while.
Okay. So to review, I know we went over this last time, but just to review the school code regarding PE exemptions. So students are required to participate in daily physical education classes. But the district can excuse students if they meet one of these criteria. So if the students enroll in an academic class, if they need the class for graduation, if they need it for college, if they're in a credit-bearing marching band program, if they need a special education support class, so they have that time in their schedule, if they're in ROTC, or for what we're focusing on right now, which is the ongoing participation in interscholastic sports. And as Hank said, we got confirmation from the state that that interscholastic sports means a district-sanctioned district sport. So not club, not a student who plays club outside, but actually our sports, our teams. So the change, or the biggest change there, is grades 7 through 12. Before this, it was grades 11 through 12. So it expanded the grade levels. The other areas are pretty much the same. So before, you could enroll in classes for graduation, any of those factors were the same.
So
The big
so you have
difference
that
is-
change, and you have and then the clarity that it's only, can't do it for clubs or things outside of school.
That's
that
right.
Clarity.
It's ongoing participation.
That's, I just emphasize that.
Absolutely. That's very, very important. Because I get calls on that all
Right.
the time. Because
right.
people believe that the law means that if their child
Right.
plays sports outside,
Right.
that qualifies. So it's a very good point, thank you.
That's why we had to wait for the wording, or the recommendation from ISB, because the wording is confusing in the actual law, right? So we were waiting for that clarification before, otherwise we would have come to the board a long time ago.
So we have a clarification, and then just for emphasis, we don't have a choice on this.
No, it's
just
not our option.
So that
No.
people are aware.
Absolutely. Very good point, thank you.
I'd like to ask a question, and it doesn't have to do with interscholastic sports. But, to enroll in academic class is required for admission. So we're talking about basic requirements like whatever it is, 4 years of English, 3 years of a language. We're not talking about taking an AP course so that you can have an opportunity to place in a better institution?
That's where
Or
the,
institution of, I shouldn't say better, institution of choice?
yeah, and that's
It's
where the
definitely
wording
gray
is
area.
definitely somewhat gray, but if you go to the law that we provided you, if we go to, Tony, could we pull up, can you jump out and pull up, it's the one that's the school code. And if you can go to page 2,
You got this memorized?
yeah.
Wow, that's impressive.
So this is where it kind of starts to spell it out. So enroll in academic classes which are required for admission to an institution of higher learning. And if failure to take such courses will result in the pupil being denied admission. So that's where it gets, because it depends, right? It depends on what that kid's 4-year plan is, what college or university they're planning to go into. So that's why we say it ties back to the student's 4-year plan. If the counselor meets with the student and they've talked through what that student's plans are and it meets that criteria, then we can waive it. If it's just, I'd like to take another class instead of PE, then it doesn't fall under the intent of the law.
I think a good example, in my opinion, of that statement is our Calculus 3. So our students who go to Lamont are going to be gone for 2 periods, period 1 and 2. They'd be back in time for 3rd period. Would you say that Calculus 3 is required for entry to college? No, we would have very few students going to college. However, it is a college-level course. It's an opportunity that really stands that student above, as Mike said, from others. That, I believe, would be a good example of a way in which, or a time in which, we would waive it. So an AP class, that kind
It's
of,
going to be case-by-case basis.
And that's
definitely
what-
case by case.
And that's what the law allows for, is on a case-by-case basis. So that's why we can't just make a blanket, you know, any kid, you know, we got to look at that kid's situation and then make the decision.
And the argument's probably most strongly made in, you know, going into the senior year, that sort of thing, because a freshman's, you know, not going to know really which school they're going to, let alone what the
their path
requirements
is
are
gonna
to get
be,
in there.
yeah.
And what their major would even be, that's right.
Right.
So that, as I said the last time we met, the challenge with this is there's blanket requirements about 4 years of PE and that, but then there's this exemption language that's a case-by-case basis, but now you're trying to make decisions that are policy that apply equally to all students, so it just really gets messy in here.
But it is your, I'm going to say the administration's call. I mean, is the state going to come back and say, you know what, I disagree with you? You know, that student isn't.
Good question.
As long as we're doing it on a case-by-case basis, that's what the law allows for, and that's what we've been advised to work with. If we blanket said, hey, all kids don't have to take PE if you're in a sport and you're going to just take any other class you want, including like a study hall or an extra lunch, then it would start to get sketchy with the state. Yeah.
I can't get my food in 20 minutes, can I?
Right, so we would run into trouble with that. That's why
I don't eat, I'm not going to be able to get into college.
The other,
Yeah, as we move from, the closer we switch, or there's a fine line in there somewhere when you're moving from case by case to just blanket for everyone. And that's what we're trying to find, is that sweet spot in what we're bringing you.
But wouldn't this too require a student kind of bringing to your attention that they would want to take this class as opposed to a PE class? So it will never be where a counselor is suggesting, well, you could do this and not take PE. So pretty much the student would have to.
during registration.
Okay.
It depends
It's
on the student
possible.
and the direction they're going. It could be possible that a counselor would
possible.
say, based on the career choices you're making and the college you're going at, and you're involved in a sport, that we recommend that you take this course instead of PE. And that you apply for this waiver and you go through the process. Or this exemption, not this waiver.
It's possible, but it's not likely to happen, I don't think.
Right, it's a case by case.
And I think key language, and obviously in the document we just looked at, which is the Senate bill, it gives you more specific. This is obviously just a summary, but it's also important to point out, may excuse. The state doesn't say we have to excuse any student.
Okay.
The district may. There are some schools that do not do athletic.
No exemptions or waivers.
No exemptions. So that is also where it's a little bit different too. I just want to point that out because I think that word may is important there.
Well, I guess.
Not must, you know.
The other side is there a regulatory entity that could look at it and say, you know, District 99, you've been exempting a lot of students. You know, maybe we really need to look at you and go back and say, you know, no. So there is a group that will.
Yes, there's a compliance audit that happens
Yes.
that looks at our policies and how we're going through them. And when that compliance audit comes around, that could be a finding for a recommendation for change.
Okay, all right. I just want to be clear. And
No, it's a very good point.
But it's our option whether or not we want to exercise this discretion or not.
Right.
Which is,
It's not a-
so it's nice that we're talking about it and we're considering it.
So and really what Gina's been working at with the chairs is trying to, once again, find that spot where it provides options for our students. It's not overly restrictive, but we still follow the intention of the law. And we still respect the fact that there is a 4-year PE requirement in the state. The expectation of the state standards is that students have 4 years of PE. So it's all of the balancing of these different interests.
Well, have the 4 years of PE and then are also getting a certain level of instruction. There are certain benchmarks that are supposed to be
Right.
reached, which, so I'm interested in.
how that's going to be achieved if.
Yeah, I think your presentation got derailed here a little bit with the interruption, so I apologize for that. So, you know, the next pieces of this is what's really, I think, one of the reasons why you guys kicked it back up to us to talk some more, so.
Sorry.
No, it's all good. So I thought it would make sense to talk about the 11th and 12th grade students first. 11th and 12th grade students have been receiving exemptions before. So figured we would start there. So they've always been required to be an active member of a junior varsity or varsity sport, actually varsity sport. This will expand obviously to junior varsity athletes as well. They've always been, all students have to take 6 academic classes. It's very rare that we have students that take less. Very rare. And those are kind of case-by-case extreme situations as well. So those are required. The change from last time, I think, comes in the last 2 bullets, which I know there's a lot of words there, but I thought it was important to make it very clear. So one of the concerns, of course, is if a student is not in a class, in a PE class very long. So in other words, they're in football, and they come back into the class being responsible for the content from before that time. So in our work, we've been talking about if a student's season spans 12 weeks or less, so the athletic season spans 12 weeks or less, the student would be enrolled in a PE class. While the sports season, the student would be in the study hall, just like we talked about last time. And then when it's not in season, the student would attend PE class. If the student's season spans more than 12 weeks, so this would be, for example, a track student, second semester, spans around 14, 15 weeks, so it's more than 12. Or it could be where seasons overlap.
I was about to. Okay.
You know, where the student is into varsity sports, for example, whose seasons encompass an entire semester, the student would then be waived. Waived meaning not enrolled in a PE course. They could take another class, but they would not be enrolled in PE. So if it's 12 weeks or more, whether it's a single sport, but it's in a semester. So 12 weeks or more in a semester. Whether it's a single sport, like track would be second semester, or overlapping within a semester, the student would be waived out of PE. In other words, not enrolled in a PE course.
So what's the magic about 12?
We had a lot of conversations curricularly. We felt like that was, you're still getting 1/3 of the semester. So that was, we have to figure out what ongoing works with and what curriculum works with and all these, so that was
I'm
kind
trying
of
to
where
foresee
we.
problems. So do we have
We'll keep working,
sports?
wait, we'll keep working through, let us
Okay, all right, sorry.
finish the procedures and then we'll get to the questions. But there's
I think
two
it'll
key
help you.
vocabulary words that Gina just introduced that, to understand everything else, I want to stop and clarify.
Okay.
So exempt means that you have an ongoing sport. While that sport is in season, you're in a study hall. When the sport ends, 12 weeks or less, you are returning to the PE class to be exposed to that content. If we expect that you're going to be in 2 sports or more, or your season lasts more than 12 weeks, we are allowed to waive the credit. That means that graduation requirement never existed for you. So it removes that shortens that 4-year requirement to 3.5 or 3, or depending on what it works with for you. And at that point, it's completely waived. You could go and enroll in another course, you could be in a study hall, you can do any of those things.
So in the first scenario, where they're exempt and they have to go back to gym, what content are they responsible
We're
for?
getting there.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's do grade 9 and 10, and we'll come back.
Okay.
Okay?
We're building for a big finish.
Oh, geez, what happened here? Expectation.
Crescendo.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
There we go. So grade 9 and 10, we're still looking at the varsity athletes, still 6 academic classes. That's standard for all students. Still the same idea of the 12-week threshold. So if the student season is 12 weeks or less of a semester, student would be enrolled in a PE class. We go back into the class when the season is not in session. Same thing,
Everything's the same except for
All the
junior
same.
varsity.
That's what I was going to, just
Only
wanted to make sure
difference-
that's what I was seeing.
the only difference is the junior varsity and obviously the grade level.
Okay.
Now, one more thing to talk about here. I don't know if you get to it later. 10th grade? Do you get to that later? Do you want to talk about
I
it?
was going to.
You are going to get to it?
Yeah.
Okay, then I will stop.
Okay, so the main change there is just in the 12-week and only varsity athletes for grades 9 and 10. And part of the reason, as Dr. Thiele already said, is that it's about a third of the content. We do believe the content is important. We do believe that in our, especially our freshman class and our sophomore, but I'll talk about sophomore in just a second, is where a lot of that content is. So in those standard PE Wellness 1, PE Wellness 2.
Right.
So when I talk about content, and I'm not going to go, I do not know the content to the depth that Courtney and Scott do. They gave you much more detail than I will. But I just wanted to point out a couple of things here. So this is PE Wellness 1. This is our freshman PE course. It contains swimming. There's a 3 to 4 week unit of swimming. It's basically water safety, it's refining strokes, it's building endurance. The course is really, there's definitely a complete unit there for all students that have to show some mastery. Obviously, water safety, very important. There's also a lot of fitness built into this. You'll see with the FIT formula there. So really kind of those lifelong skills that we want students to have. Hopefully, in terms of the swimming, they don't find themselves in a situation where they have to use that, but at least they have that basis. PE Wellness 2 also has a aquatic safety unit. It's also about 3 or 4 weeks. It's a little more advanced, a lot more on stroke development, and a lot more on life-saving skills. They also do some other fitness games in the water, like water polo, but they do talk about things like how to release a cramp, or what do you do if you're exhausted in the water? How can you, recoup from that? So we feel that curriculum's really important. We also stuck with the varsity athletes because remember, sophomore year, many students do not have PE at all.
Right.
Sophomore year, all students are required to take health. Health is a 1-semester course. So for 1 semester, every student will not have PE for just 1 semester. About 50 to 60%, and it depends on the year, of our sophomores take driver's ed. So 1 semester they take health, 1 semester they take driver education. Those students do not have physical education. We do have about 40%, sometimes it's a little bit higher than 40% of students who will take driver's ed, what we call outside, which means with one of the companies. It does fulfill the graduation requirement, they just have to bring in proof that they've completed it successfully. So the majority of our students, of our sophomores, are not taking PE anyway. And our freshman curriculum at least gives the basis of the water safety, the basis of fitness. Is that single year meeting all of the P standards? No. But at least it's hitting on a lot of those standards and those lifelong skills that we want students to have. That's one of the reasons why we focused on varsity athletes, because there'd be a lot fewer than if we went with junior varsity and varsity. We do feel the content at that lower levels is very important. And for the most part, we're talking about 9th grade because of the 10th grade health and driver education issue. No questions? Okay. So with this, we are suggesting some procedural changes. So going back to the student who is exempt because the season spans 12 weeks or less within a semester, we would like that student to be able to opt for a pass-fail grade. Currently, we only offer pass-fail grades in music and in keyboarding, and we typically do not run keyboarding. Sometimes we run an opposite keyboarding lunch, but it's pretty rare. So this is something that's been really, we don't allow all students to do this, but we believe that this should be an option for these students. It would be something that they would have to elect for in advance. Even with the pass-fail grade, for the time in which the student's season, or is in season, for the time in which they're exempt, they would get 100% for the physical activity. They would have 100% A. They would not be required to take the final exam, and they would not be responsible for the classwork from the time in which they were exempt, so the written work from that time. The pass-fail grades do not count in a student's GPA, so it's not going to hurt them. It's not going to help them, but it's not going to hurt them. And obviously, they would have to earn a passing grade to be awarded credit. Those students same students, may not want a pass-fail grade. We want to leave that up to the student and the family to make that choice, that decision. If they opt to earn a letter grade, then it would be the same as it always is in terms of, an A through F, obviously. They still would receive 100% for the time in which they're exempt, because we're assuming that they're in the sport, they're getting their physical activity. Mm-hmm. They would be required, though, to take the final. And there could be questions on there from the time in which they're exempt, but remember, everything is online for them through Classroom and whatnot, and a lot of that's going to build, some of that's going to build as well.
And they'll still be aware of when the classroom day is, so if they want to go experience that content, because they have chosen to take it for a grade, they still have that option.
They could. And then, of course, they'd have to earn an A through a D grade for it, obviously, to earn credit. Mm-hmm. But it would factor into their GPA. Mm-hmm. The difference is the pass-fail does not factor in. The letter grade does factor in. In both cases, if the student earns a passing grade, they would get credit.
So it sounds like, if I understood correctly, that they are not going to be required to take the final if they opt for pass-fail.
Yes.
So how are you going to assess if they pass or fail?
Based on the grades we have.
It's based on the grades we have and that 100% from when they come in. So, for example.
13 through, what is?
Well, it depends
18. Depends on the athlete. So let's take football. So student comes into the class around Halloween, let's say. They're going to have 100% for as many weeks as that is before Halloween. Then whatever they do from Halloween to winter break, they'll have a grade. That will be their grade. They will not be required to take that final exam.
And the final exam
the pass-fail.
would typically be what percentage of the grade anyhow?
Typically 10. Typically
10%.
10 in PE.
No, I get it. I just, there are classes grades that'll be accumulated. Anyway, it just won't be a final.
Right. It won't count against them. So.
All right.
But in terms of other assessments, that's 90% of the grade is in those other assessments anyhow. So
right. So it's not.
Yeah. Okay.
But we'd like that to be the choice of the student and the family. So they would have to opt for, and even in music, they have to do it in advance. It's not, I'm going to wait and see what kind of grade I'm earning.
Right, you have to decide ahead of
Right,
time.
it has to be decided in advance, so we would follow some of the same,
Yeah.
criteria. And then just to go back, this is the school code, which I referenced in the beginning, just again to point out, some of the change in terms of the new law, grades 7 through 12, and the interscholastic sport, meaning school sanctioned. So questions?
That include like lacrosse and hockey and those sports that are sanctioned but yet not considered.
The change for next year would be because lacrosse is now an IHSA competitive sport.
Okay, all right.
That sport would be added by our board policy and by the way that the law is written. Lacrosse would now become as a sport that students would be, have the option of having an exemption.
Okay. Well, what about hockey?
Hockey is not.
It's not
an
IHSA.
IHSA sport.
Even though it has our school name?
Correct. It's not an IHSA. It's not a interscholastic.
I'm just asking,
no, just by the
because
So
definition.
it's confusing.
Yeah.
It doesn't meet
Can be
the
very confusing.
criteria,
Doesn't meet the
though.
criteria.
It's not
Yeah.
something we can opt to include,
Right, it's not considered interscholastic.
even though it's,
because of the way, the clarification that we got, it's not something we have the choice of. It has to be
Gotta meet
an
that criteria.
IHSA varsity sport. Otherwise, we could talk about that. Yeah.
Right, if IHSA changed the, how they recognize hockey differently, then.
is that the only one?
Hockey?
Yeah,
Yeah, now it will be because lacrosse just changed.
yeah, okay.
You know, Don, last time we talked about this, I thought you had some good comments that I've thought about since. So I was wondering what your feeling is on all this right now, and you were prepared to share some comments.
I question why in 9th and 10th grade, we didn't want to count JV or other athletic participation. I was just anticipating some criticisms from parents stating that their kids who are participating in those level of sports are participating in equal level as the varsity athletes, and what kind of justification can we provide as to the distinction. That was my comments last time.
I remember you making the point that if we think that those things that we're teaching in 9th grade, 10th grade are important, then why are we opting to even have the exemption?
So my question tonight is, I'd still like a further explanation on that. And then if we do believe strongly that the material in the coursework is critical, why provide an exemption? Because you're missing a class for 12 weeks or up to 12 weeks, which is almost 2/3 of the class that you're missing, and then you're throwing them back into the classroom and saying they either going to pass, fail, or take it for a grade, and we're sticking in them in a study hall during the other period of time. I mean, it seems to me that if 12 weeks is the threshold, that we grant a waiver for 12 weeks or more, and we don't do the exemption under 12
Right,
weeks.
no, you're saying under 12 weeks?
Under 12 weeks, I would say, what's the point of an exemption?
Right, yeah, that's what we're saying. If your sport lasts 12 weeks or more.
No.
saying 12 weeks or
I'm
less.
saying if
You're
you're
saying
under
12
if
weeks
you're
or
under
less?
12 weeks, I don't see why we'd grant exemptions and then throw them back in the class and say you either got to pass, fail.
Oh, you're saying
or
no
take-
exemption at all?
That's, yeah.
Because we would have an uprising amongst our students in our community and our parents, because they expect that this
Not for
law
9th and 10th grade,
affords.
I don't think.
Yeah,
Not for 9th and 10th.
Maybe not 9th and 10th.
That's why we brought
but
this
11th,
back,
had it
12th,
because
for 10.
we cannot agree on this. And so I wanted to hear the whole board before we sat and crafted a policy, because
And the
we're in
reason-
disagreement on this.
Sorry, Rick. The reason for 9 and 10 is because the law extended to 7 through 12.
Yeah.
We have heard from parents that have contacted Gina and I directly that say, we expect that you will be expanding this option.
Okay.
So we, in response to the families that reached out to us, tried to craft language that met that expectation from some of our families. So we did our best to try to expand based on what the law allowed and what we felt we could allow within our curriculum, and we've presented that to the board as
How many
options.
ninth graders are in a varsity sport now?
Very few.
Yeah, and you could
Yeah, I was gonna
potentially
say
miss
probably less than a
two-thirds of
dozen.
health.
No, you don't get an exemption
Can't
for
exempt
health.
out of health.
But if you're a varsity athlete across the board in
No.
all seasons,
No, you cannot exempt
You
out
can't
of health
exempt out
or
of health,
driver's
though.
ed.
So we're really only talking about ninth graders.
Yeah, we're talking about ninth grade.
Well, I guess,
10th graders that are taking driver's ed outside of school.
I guess I'm looking
about
at it
40%.
as you have certain benchmarks that you want the students to know by the time they graduate. And that being, the aquatics section, you can go through and pick those. And maybe what we should do is have them required to do those sections before they graduate at some time frame of the 4 years. I'm just throwing that out there.
I think that those classes that we're teaching in ninth grade are valuable.
Yes.
And I don't think that any freshman should be able to get out of it.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's where I'm at right now. But, I'm not seeing where, I see where maybe there's some parents, I'd be interested to know how many are we talking about?
Three?
Okay, and then secondly, what's the burden? How is this, I don't know. I have 3 high schoolers right now. I have one that graduated. They've all gone through this. They've been athletes all 4 years, some not, some varsity from freshman year on. And I don't see where it was a burden for my students to
Take
sit in
PE.
that, that if you would, because the PE class, it's not that tough to begin with. Okay, so this isn't something that they're spending an enormous amount of homework on, these sorts of things.
It's not discrete math.
It's not calculus 3.
I think that there's value in having all of our students take these classes, and so I've kind of, coming to the last meeting, I was more wanting to think about taking advantage of this, and now I'm more of the opinion that I think for ninth grade, I think that there's value in having our students take the PE classes.
I agree there's value in our students taking the classes, and I don't really understand what the value of giving a waiver is. But that said, I think if I was a parent who had a student who was spending their evenings at practice, I would look at it as a good time for a study hall. Instead of them coming home.
Right.
But you can still have a study
Okay,
hall.
so yeah, I mean, I didn't see much value in the study hall, but the way you put it there is they're practicing after school.
Yeah.
They need some extra time to catch up on their homework.
That's the value I see in
That's the
it.
value.
And I don't disagree with that, but
Okay.
again, you're talking,
That makes sense to me.
you're probably talking 4 or 5 kids in ninth grade. You're not talking, we're not talking about changing it for juniors or seniors. They'll still have
That
the chance
option.
to take the option to take the study hall. What we're talking about now is ninth and 10th graders. In 10th grade, you
They're
can't
locked
opt
in
out of
anyway.
health anyway. You're
You're
locked
locked
in.
Well, no, I don't disagree with you. I'm just saying that I
Yeah,
would.
so if we're talking about freshmen,
Or
And I'm
varsity,
thinking that
right.
very small.
I shouldn't,
I would say that if you're a varsity athlete, there's content in those PE classes your freshman year that you ought to get that content.
Yeah.
It should be important to you to get that content.
So
Well, and
they
I'm
may
looking
work-
at their class load at the freshman level. It's not like the senior level student who has a class load that might be a little heavier than the freshman.
But they're also new to high school.
Yeah,
Depends on the
but I
student.
mean,
That's why it's a case-by-case basis.
yeah.
So I'm going to put our student representatives on the spot.
Yeah, let's get some feedback over here.
Let's ask some students. Have you heard, is there a lot of discussion in the hallways as you walk through about this exemption?
Especially I'm actually exempt right now and I do track. So it's really nice because I actually have an extra study hall where I can do homework, and it's really, really nice. And I don't know, personally, I just don't think that there's a point of, especially if you're in a class that's in for 12 weeks and then you're not in that class, and then you have the option, I know there's a lot of kids that would want their grades to count towards their GPA, but at the same time, I wouldn't want to have to learn all the material by myself, not having studied anything for 12 weeks. hop back into it and then take the final. Like, I wouldn't want to do that. And I just don't think, but I wouldn't want the, like, pass or fail either. Like, I feel like that just simplifies it too much. So personally, I don't know. I just wouldn't want to, like, know that I missed 12 weeks of a class and then put the pressure on myself to, like, relearn the material and take the final, because that's my grade. So
Yeah, that's why we ended up with that pass-fail option. But a lot of it was feedback from students, so.
yeah.
What about the freshman issue, though? You know, your freshman year, is it?
I personally think freshman PE is really important because you learn a lot about like nutrition, resting heart rate, target heart rate. I mean, swimming, that's not stuff that you can really like make up. I mean, even if you miss a day of swimming, if you're in freshman PE, you have to make up every single day that you're in the water. And so I think freshman PE is important. I think you should be there. But then again, like, there's not many students who would be able to be exempt from that, right?
Yeah. I think especially with freshmen, like, the only sport that I can really think of that freshmen would be on varsity on, like, a serious level is track. Like, I was, like, when I ran track, I was on track on varsity since freshman year. But I don't know. I didn't mind taking PE. It wasn't that that big of a deal to me, to be honest. It's an easy class. It's basically an easy A. So I didn't mind taking it. And I feel like the amount of students that actually would have to, like, not take PE, I guess if they're training to be elite. But other than that, I don't know. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think freshmen should take it.
It's like, you know, the nutritional things are
Yeah, we do learn a lot. So
They expand on that in health. sophomore
Yeah,
year.
and my daughter is on tennis team. She was varsity freshman year, and I thought that was. I mean, she would come home and talk about what she was learning in. I mean, I think it's a valuable thing.
Yeah.
So am I hearing consensus that the board would prefer 9th grade left out of the exemptions?
In 10th.
You might as well do 10 too, because
10th, like the health issue, right? I mean,
No, they'd still.
Health
they'd
and
still
driver's
have to
ed.
take health.
Have to take health.
No,
They
that's what I'm
still have to
saying.
take
That's what I'm
driver's
saying.
ed.
Hey,
Yeah.
that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying that. So my point is that 10th, you can't be exempted out of health. So
Why include
it'd
it?
be just one semester of PE that you could potentially be waived out for 10th
Correct.
grade?
Absolutely.
And only
unless you
for
take
those
driver's ed.
Taking driver's ed.
Unless you take
somewhere else.
driver's ed.
Or if they're taking driver's ed the
Yeah.
first semester of junior year, which happens as
Okay,
well.
okay,
Then they wouldn't exempt out because driver's ed counts.
okay.
So
You're not
then
asking
I-
for action tonight anyways, are you?
No, it has to go back
It's
to the
gotta go back
policy.
committee.
But we
the
asked,
policy committee wants a recommendation.
we
from
asked
the
for your
board.
input.
So you want us to
Did that
recommend
help?
to you so you can recommend back to us.
Yeah.
Or we could skip all that and take it for, we could consider this first reading and then,
No,
Rick,
I'm
did
glad
that
guys
help
brought it
you?
back. I'm glad you guys brought it
It did
back.
because I'm with a lot, where we ended up is where I was out of the gate, but it was against the recommendation. And so that's why I wanted to feel back. I was an outlier, I thought, at the
Ed would
last
like to
meeting.
hop in here, he has a
There was just
point.
one question that still went unanswered. Don, you were talking about less than 12, more than 12, why exempt? We came up with the 12 because every season, we're trying to write one policy that covers everything, and every athletic season is a different length, and it has a different variable. Football could end October 20th, or it could end at Thanksgiving.
Right.
Every other sport has a 3-week variance, so to try to find a number that fits everything is hard. So
Yeah.
that goes back to the question you were asking, why exempt at all, or when to, and the 12-week question. So I just wanted to throw that in because, you know, we're trying to make laws that fit everything and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you did say that you've had a number of parents contact you. How many?
Between the two of us, maybe
And I get quite a bit, but they're not all just about the interscholastic. A lot of mine are also about club and outside dance, so yeah.
Because that's where I see it really coming from. Hey, my kid's doing this
not
say,
just
hockey or so- on some club, and they're putting in an extraordinary amount of time and
A lot of
looking for
exercise.
exemption there, and that's something we can't.
It's out of our hands.
It's out of our hands.
Cannot do it.
I think it's a legitimate argument for
Sure.
sure, and
Well, this is the reason why we've structured it the way we have, right? We've heard from kind of both, we have the curricular angle, we've heard from the
Yeah.
community members. The board is here to represent ultimately the community. So we brought you an option that we tried to hit every checkbox as much as we could for everybody. If the board is weighing that those curricular needs are more important than offering that exemption to grades 9 and 10, I actually think that's something our PE department could get behind. They believe in their curriculum.
Right.
I believe in their curriculum. But I also have to balance community. I have to bring you all of that, right? If the board is recommending no exemptions be expanded to grades 9 and 10, that's absolutely appropriate, and there's many school districts that are taking that route.
So let's just do a quick check and see how many people at this
Can I ask
point.
one more question, Nancy, before you do that?
Oh, sure, I'm sorry, I think Sherelle, before you.
No, go ahead.
Ladies first.
Okay. So back to Nancy's point, I just want to make sure I understand you mentioned the study hall. So you still, as a freshman and sophomore, perhaps, if you're participating in a varsity sport, you still have the opportunity to have the study hall prior to that 12-week. Okay. Because
If we want to do that, we do. That's
what
the question.
exemption allows.
That's the question.
Okay.
Do we want to allow that?
So if we remove the exemption, then what will that? I didn't
That's
realize
in
that.
PE, they wouldn't ever go to study hall.
Okay.
Unless they took a study hall.
Right,
Some
on
students.
top of,
Yeah.
somewhere within their schedule, but so a study hall would not replace the PE class
I
while
just
they
wanna
were in interscholastic.
Clarify that.
athletic.
Okay.
And then we focused on freshman PE coursework and the importance. Are there examples that are similar for our junior and senior level PE coursework?
There are, and there are actually some courses that we will not allow students to exempt or waive out of. So, for example, our personal trainer course, a student cannot exempt out of that. If the student is planning to take that course, they have to take the course. Self-defense, PE leader, lifeguarding. I have a document with all of them on
Anything
there.
that leads to some kind of a certification.
Yeah,
those
any kind of
If
specialized.
you're signing up for that, you know.
Yeah, you can't get the deal. You
But
can't
by
get the,
No.
pass-fail deal for
If
after
you
12
want the
weeks.
exemption, don't sign up for one of
But
those
if they're
courses.
signing up for that, they probably wouldn't be looking for an exemption.
They're usually not going to.
Right.
Now, P Wellness 2, which I had shown some of the content from that, if I can get back to it. P Wellness 2, some students take as a sophomore. So I might be in health first semester and P Wellness 2 second semester. So this would be my, basic topics sophomore year. Some students will take health and driver's ed, either way. And then P Wellness 2 would be junior year. So this is a sophomore/junior course. Depends on the student whether or not they take driver education. So this would also be curriculum that, again, it's based on fitness, nutrition is part of it, brain functioning is part of it, aquatic safety.
My point being is, all of your points about these being great courses that we don't believe we should exempt our students out of could potentially apply to, juniors.
Except that I think that those freshman year classes are really foundational
They're
classes.
Okay.
That you at least need that.
Okay.
For the
And these
athletics
things-
also.
These all build on those things that you learned in your freshman year, if I'm.
Is that right?
So.
Yeah.
Like
so
they're
that's
It's
learning
actually very similar to English.
kind of
Your,
spirals.
your first 2 years of English, you're taking kind of those core concepts and building the basic skills. Then junior, senior year, you start to take things based on your interests. And it works very similar in PE.
So I'm still a little stuck on the exemption, but if we're hearing from our parents that they'd like their kids to have study hall available for that less than 12-week period.
Yeah. So here's my problem with that. Because I understand that view. My daughter was in speech. Those kids put in much more time than any athlete.
Well, that's a.
Well, I don't know, but
That's debatable.
That's debatable.
Careful.
Let me just say, those kids put in a bone-crushing schedule.
They put in it's
But you're in
impressive.
speech, right?
Yes.
It's
Team at
impressive.
South Varsity stays till 6 Monday through Friday. You have a tournament. You have to get to school at 5:45 in the morning. You get back at 6. On a Saturday. So your Saturday's gone.
Yeah.
Monday through Friday till 6, gone. Sunday,
Catch up.
So my point is that there are other there are other non-athletic
Yes.
clubs and activities that
Study hall. is
that
what
could
you're
use a
saying.
study hall, an extra study hall.
So
That's
we
my point.
But we shouldn't make the people who have, that were unable to help them in this way, we shouldn't penalize them. I mean, I wish that maybe happened, that was available, but.
I'm just not a big fan of this exemption concept.
I agree with you. I'm not
Being
either.
thrown back into the classroom. I don't see a lot of benefit there.
I'm not following you. Don.
'Cause you
What's-
miss potentially 2/3 of the class,
Uh-huh.
and then either you're pass fail or you're taking a grade. It just seems to me you're missing a majority of the content.
Our practice right now, though, Don,
Yeah.
is you're exempted and you're out for the entire semester.
Yeah.
You don't get any of the
Right.
content.
Yeah, and I don't like that either, I guess.
That's what we
So
got
at
right
least in
now.
this way, we're A, following the law,
I know.
and B, you're getting at least some of the content.
I know.
Well, and the other thing, as Ed said, 12 weeks is what we selected, but not every sport's going to be 12 weeks. So golf, be out maybe, 4 weeks?
Sure.
Something,
Yeah,
5
sure,
weeks, something
sure.
like that. So
Yeah.
they're not necessarily not every athlete's going to miss 12 weeks. It's just that's kind of a parameter for
An
which to.
average.
It's a good thing we changed the school calendar, because this could have got muddy.
It's always been
Because there are some sports that were starting their season before the start of the school year. So does that time count towards the 12 weeks? I mean, which you would say it wouldn't.
Only when we're in
but,
session.
Because football starts, what,
Right.
4 weeks before
So-
school starts?
So
I
just,
don't mean to be critical.
Yeah.
I know this is
Oh.
not an easy issue.
yeah.
Just-
I think they practice.
So let's just take a little process check. How many people on the board would be supportive of not extending this to 9th and 10th grade?
Oh, yeah.
So this is we're voting
10.
positive for the negative.
10,
right?
Can we separate 9th and 10th?
Okay, let's do 9th.
9th?
Right.
Not doing 9th.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so not in favor of 9th. Yeah, let us know what
Yeah.
student-wise, this is straw
Yeah.
poll, so you
I
get to
think-
vote now.
I think the freshmen should just take PE.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They should just take it.
Yeah.
Okay, 10th grade?
10th grade, I could go either way on that.
I don't think they should opt out of that.
So raise your hand. We're talking about not opting out.
Not
Oh, not.
Not
Oh, I
opting
thought
out.
I'd go like halfway, because I really would go with the majority on this.
It would really help if you committed, because we're right on the line. I can't have a half.
Not opting out. This is a straw
Not
vote.
opting out.
Okay, could you state that in the
They
affirmative?
have to take sophomore.
How many
PE.
people think you have to take sophomore PE?
Yes.
But then I'm lost on this. We said you have to take health and you have to take
That's
driver's.
sophomore
So this
PE.
would just be the kids that had taken
Driver's
driver's
ed
ed outside
somewhere
of
else.
school. Yeah,
Just
Which
For
was
one
my-
varies.
Which was my daughter, and she took PE, so.
right.
See, and the reason I'm kind of okay with allowing the exemption there is because you've got so many kids that are taking PE and they're not taking that, or taking driver's ed, so they're not taking a
Had
PE
experience
class anyhow. So to allow the other 40% or whatever, I mean, I've got no problem giving them that same situation. It's kind of where
This
I'm.
is for the kids who are taking driver's ed somewhere else.
Correct.
Right.
So
which
it's only, there's, I would, well,
It's
a lot of
like
kids
maybe
do.
40%. It
Yeah,
varies year to year.
Yeah, yeah.
And who are in a sport that's longer than 12 weeks.
And they have to be a varsity athlete.
And they would have to,
And they-
unless
And they
you
have to be
decided it
varsity.
was any
Well,
athlete.
now that
Well, I
we
mean, you
narrowed
could.
it down to 3 students.
Yeah.
Right.
Give them the personal exemption.
Sophomores that are.
Just do it individually.
athletes.
Well, it'd have to be allowed by policy for us to do that. So then you'd have to say grades 10, 11, and 12.
So again, how many people think we should not, how many people think, I'm so confused now. How many,
Should we let the 10th graders exempt?
How many people think we should let the 10th graders exempt? Nobody wants to let the
Should we let
10th.
them?
Let them
Let's
have,
let
let them have the
they have to
exemption.
enter
10th, I would,
sophomores.
yes. Freshmen, no.
9, we've got a no. 10, it looks like a no.
Okay?
Yeah.
So then it's grade, so all it is,
Only 11 and
is,
12 is what.
Only 11.
Is it,
so we don't need to change the policy.
Yeah, you do, because they have to go back to study
They
hall.
have to go back.
No, that's procedural.
That's
not
procedural.
It's procedural.
Okay,
The policy.
You're right.
Policy stays the same.
Policy stays the same. Wow, that solves us enough.
That was a lot of work to keep the policy the same.
You know what, but you need to be able to talk, we need to be able to talk to the community and say, here's what we did, and that we went through and we gave this a real serious vetting.
We haven't taken action yet either.
Yeah,
And
that's true, too.
There is another policy that will have to come as a result of this, which is a modification in our pass-fail policy.
pass-fail.
So that will be a partner policy.
Okay.
It will have to go to the policy committee to come along with this. So we may, procedurally, since we've talked through this so much, we may call a quick policy meeting to make sure that that's all clear. And then we may ask at the next board meeting, when all of these other policies we're going to talk about tonight come back for final approval, to waive the first reading of this, so we can just take care of it all. Because it's not like we haven't discussed it.
Yeah. Well, and just to make sure we have every fly in the ointment.
Sure.
I would just remind you of past discussions about looking very strongly at exempting certain courses from having a final exam.
That's a whole nother conversation we're on.
I know.
Ready to have that
We're on
discussion.
it. We're on it.
Okay.
Absolutely ready to have that
Okay.
discussion. Yeah.
Not tonight, please.
Not tonight. Yeah, it's 9 o'clock. Okay.
Rest real quick.
So the rest, okay, so.
Coming in, we were here till
So we
2 or
just
3 in
have
the
a few
morning.
other
Somebody
quick
told us.
things, I'm not thinking. Safety committee update.
No, you skipped.
I did. Oh, master facility plan, community engagement update, excuse me.
Okay, so mailing went out, letters and a fact sheet went out to all family members, along with an invite to our community nights, which we must be doing a good job of informing people through other venues, because I think we had a record whopping 40 on one night. So people have not really taken advantage of those community nights, but they've been there. But we've also gone out and gone to some community organizations, like I was at Rotary last week. We've done some PTAs, so we've done a variety of different settings that way, where maybe we went to people rather than them coming to us. We've sent out emails to students and families. We've put up new videos. We've put up all kinds of FAQs. There's a whole bunch of information on the website. We've added a finance night on March 7th, which will be held here, where Mark will go through kind of the budget report and how we do finances and what the impact of the referendum would be on property taxes. And then we will do a Facebook Live event on March 14th. So we'll kind of do a Facebook Live presentation, kind of Ask Me Anything event. So if it was that people didn't want to come here, they could participate in their pajamas, and we'll meet them virtually in their house. So that's kind of where we're at on that.
So if we can do that, how come we can't Skype Calculus 3 in?
Because we have to partner with the university, and they have to offer.
Just asking.
I have no problem with that. The university, on the other hand, may not be cool with that. So, any questions on master facility plan?
Thank you for the good work.
Yeah. Absolutely. A lot of work.
Safety committee update, we thought in light of recent events and tragedies that it was appropriate to talk about this tonight. The board has all seen the note that we sent to the school community following Parkland that talked about the moments of silence in the schools and what we did there. That was followed up. In response to that, I received a whole bunch of questions from parents saying, can you fill us in on your safety practices? I'm sure you're safe, but I'd like to know more.
Right.
So then we wrote up the next email that went out and explained our safety practice as much as we could. Remember, there's a fine line between being able to share the safety practices and giving away too much information so that they're no longer safety practices, right? So that went out to everybody as well. In response to that, we received a whole bunch of emails with, have you considered this, that, and the other thing, and here's my suggestions. And so we pooled all of those together, and Jim Colleget is pulling together the administrative arm of our safety committee to start going through all of those things that were offered up to us from our community, to just make sure we've talked through them, as well as things, there's been a lot talked about in the professional communities, and Ed's been to several principals meetings, I've been to superintendent's meetings. This is what we're talking about right now. So we've given them a whole litany of things to consider and to look through and cost out and figure out if they are changes that we want to make in the near or long-range future around not just stuff, but practices and things that we do to get better in this area. So I would imagine that in future board meetings, you're going to probably hear about some changes stemming from this.
I know Terry had to step out, but I would agree with what she had to say earlier. If you could add to the list of ideas to investigate and look into potentially expanding the number of SROs at each school, I would love to see that information.
Yeah, we'll definitely investigate that. So, more to come, I'm sure.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you to all of our teachers and our administrators and our support staff that keep our students safe every day.
Well, I appreciated the work around the rumor at South with the assembly and how we handled all of that too. I had some concerned students in my house and I knew of others. So, but I thought we did the best we could, and so I wanted to thank you for that.
Thank you.
And since we have Ed in the audience, I will take a moment to publicly just commend him for him and the way his team took it. And I think one of the key things that our staff has really done that Ed really took to the next level was on Thursday night. We've focused a lot on video over the last year and a half since I've been here. And one of the things that Ed really utilized well was putting himself on camera and being able to look parents in the eye and tell them, your kid is safe with us. And I think that goes a really long way. That's so much more powerful to parents than a memo. I mean, the memo is important and writing down is important, but he gave them both. And he took the time out to put that together and really get in front of parents. And they can see Ed and how sincere he was about that. And I think that just shows, the levels that our administrators go to show how serious we are. So thank you, Ed, to rushing and getting that done. And Jill, of course, helped put that together as well, who's traveling today. So.
Yeah, I looked over here. Usually she's right over here. So.
Yeah, she's traveling today.
And I think the video was nice, but I do think actually it's the sincerity of our principals that really, it's what brings you to the community, and we are very appreciative of that. Okay.
All right, now on to bond fund reserves.
Bond funds.
So Mark this came to us as a request from a community member that we just talked a little bit about bond fund and reserves. Nancy asked us to add it in response to that request. Just a quick primer for those of us that don't live and breathe finance like Mark does. Mark's going to report out on the reserves for bond and interest. These are a small portion of the funds that we bring in, and those taxes and interest are there to provide for losses due to property tax appeals. So that's the purpose of them sitting there. Once the bonds are completely paid off, which will happen this year, after that point, any funds that are in there, the board can consider whether or not they would like to abate those taxes back. So the earliest they could do it is now, because it'll be paid off this year. However, as you'll hear from Mark later, all of our property tax appeals could still come in, and there's still some outstanding. So he'll talk through that. So for that reason, we're not recommending at this point we abate any of those funds, but as the board has done in the past, there may be a point in the future where it's appropriate to do so. So with that, me trying to give you kind of the overarch, I'll turn it over to Mark and he'll dig into some of the specifics and details.
Thanks, and thanks, Dr. Thiele. What I want to do is just cover a couple of things that you kind of hit on the main points. There's about 6 main points that we wanted to communicate tonight, because there's some misinformation out there, but it's also not something we talk about a lot, so we thought it would be important to go dig in a little bit, maybe not too deep, but enough so that you have a good information background and bond and interest reserves. They're typically comprised of a small amount of taxes that are added at the county level. We put out a resolution that passes like the Master Facility Plan in 1998. It would generate a certain amount of dollars, and then at that same time, the debt service, the principal and interest for the duration of paying back that money is given to the county, and they will levy that. Now, what the county does is they add 1% to it. In DuPage County, each county has a little bit different approach, but typically the amount is 1% in DuPage County, and they add that to the bond and principal levy amounts. And so the debt service levy is actually increased. And the reason is not just property tax appeals, but it's also just delinquencies, loss on collections that come in from other legal settlements. But the big thing for us really is property tax appeals, because those can take years to settle, and they're usually larger. And sometimes when you get one settled, it can lead to many more being filed. And so the property, having the reserves and just saying we're going to take the reserve and close it because we have one of our biggest issues, bond issues maturing, leaves us open for the tax appeals. It also leaves us open for the other debt and bond and interest that's being levied out there as well. There's one large property tax appeal right now that we're monitoring. It goes back to 2013. In fact, so they're looking at the 2013 and 2014 levies. If they're successful, they will very likely bring that forward to 2014 and 2015. It's in the Lisle Township area. Someone is trying to determine that when you have a commercial property, anything in my parking lots should be valued at $1. They're trying to discount that, even though this is a large commercial area, so they could pop up a store out there, and they can and do sell little spaces on the outside parking. These are for really big parking lots. So Claim Jumper and all those are outlots that they're saying that value is only worth $1. So we're fighting it. But those things can get carried forward, and if we were to just cut that off, we would have to take money from other bond and interest levies or re-levy somehow to cover those tax appeals. So there's a legitimate reason to not close off your reserves just because you have a levy that's coming to maturity. So there's really two different pieces there. That little excess loss plus cost, they call it 1%, but there's also interest income. And so the reserves are really made of those two main areas. There's a little bit difference between the two in that the bond and interest excess loss portion is highly restricted. It can only be used for debt service. It can only be used to either abate or for future debt service. And that's really what we did in '98. I'll talk about that in a minute. But interest income really can be used for almost the same thing, except that we have the power to transfer that interest to any fund that's in need. There was a debt reform act, I think it was in 1989, I'm not positive about that date, that changed the rules on that interest. So you can use it now for other funds. You just need to have a resolution and transfer it out.
Mark, in most school districts, what happens on a yearly basis with those funds?
I think many do transfer it out. Now, we've decided not to, and there was, go back to a few years, there was a point when we were, the state, and they still are kind of strangling us on some funding. We put that idea out there to try and just clean up the master facility plan and do that. That's the same time we started talking about master facility plan again. And so that made me think, okay, we really shouldn't use that. We ended up satisfying and closing those transfers out of operating funds. And so we kind of left this, I purposely left this here so that we would have it if we do another large financing, because, and I think we're right in the middle of it. If we do, if the referendum is successby, we may do what we did in 1998, and that is we did abate over $1 million of taxes when we did the last master facility plan by just eating down the reserves in the bond and interest fund and allowing taxes that could have been levied to not go out. And so we did cut it. It was by over $1 million over 4 years.
So Mark, what you're saying is perhaps at some point we don't absolutely levy the $136.6 million. You maybe levy less than that based on what's already in that bond and interest.
Well, it would be, it's a better use to do that. If we just debate it right now, everybody would get a certain dollar amount, whatever it is we decide to abate. If you avoid the bonds on a new issue, you actually avoid paying the interest over the life of that for 20 years as well. So you really maximize the benefit of your reserve at that point for your taxpayers. Now, we are looking at interest rates starting to migrate back up, and that's what we're guessing, and we're trying to guess. And when we cost out this, we estimated what the cost would be to a taxpayer based on and we did pad and still have pad in our interest rates, but they are starting to move up, and they can become very volatile. And so having a reserve gives us some elbow grease there in terms of just room to help maybe keep the total cost exactly what we told people it would be. The estimates aren't guarantees. So, but we do use, logic when we try and estimate that amount, and we do expect to be able to make that, but this gives us another edge to it. And you're right, if things stay exactly like we expect, or maybe even better than we expect, we don't need all that pad, we can abate some of that 136 and maybe only have to do 135 or some other lower number, and actually keep it lower than we've projected, because we project the worst case scenario when we did those calculations. Let's see. I think I covered most of it, and actually you did a good recap for me, so you took some of the thunder out.
Sorry, Mark. I had to say it so I knew I understood it correctly.
And he does, so that's good. I think the piece the misinformation piece I'd like to address perhaps is that we're holding reserves and taxpayers' money improperly. The debt service fund is audited with our other groups. Our auditors never had a negative comment about them. We only make transactions in the bond and interest fund when we basically have opinions with special law counsel that is well-versed in only, bond and interest debt. We use a very reputable firm. And so we don't make changes, and I've cleared all of these items, these points with that firm verbally. It's also in the monthly treasurer's report. You'll see bond and interest or debt service fund listed in the monthly report. So it's all out there publicly. It's always been out there publicly. We have abated a serious amount of dollars in the past. And I think one thing I really believe that we are probably one of the best stewards in DuPage County high schools with our funds. And if Tony you've got a quick chart to throw up that you didn't see. It's really, this question is, are we holding money that we should be giving back to our taxpayers, or that, that is not, right, you gotta
scroll down to see us.
Yeah, you might have to shrink it down.
There you go.
So go up a little bit. So the first, I guess you gotta go to the top now so we can see who's who. All right, so you'll have to remember these districts. So District 94 is the first bar. We're the second column, excuse me. DuPage, 88, I believe, is the next one. Fenton High School is the fourth. The tall one there is Glenbard, 87. Full disclosure, I believe they're on cash basis, so they include the early taxes. But even if you took 40% of that away, which would be about the early taxes, they would still be substantially higher than us. Hinsdale, and then Lake Park. So those are the 7 high school districts. And now if you go down to the bottom and note those little percentages, we're at 6.1% for all of our funds combined. This is not just debt service, this is all of our funds. The little, I think it's the green section in there, represents the debt service funds. But the big picture is here, we hold less money of our taxpayers year-round than most of the other, in fact, all the other districts in DuPage County, but then many districts. So I'm very conscious about how much money we're holding for our taxpayers. I always try and make sure that what money we do hold, we leverage as well as we can. And I believe that abating off of a new issue, if this were to happen, is the smartest use of those funds. And second, if the referendum doesn't go and we end up going along, then I would maybe hold back a little bit for those other extensions that are out there, but we could offset some of those taxes at that point. If the referendum becomes moot, at that point, I think we just say, okay, let's abate it all now, because we're not going to be doing anything for quite a while.
Mark, isn't there something that, I remember seeing some sort of a grading system or a measurement that looks at the different school districts and how lean they're operating. And in fact, we don't get graded as well because we operate so lean. I mean, isn't that?
There's, in this, I think you're referring to the annual financial report. It has a district profile.
Yeah.
And, right, because our reserve levels, we keep them so low, we get dinged for that. We only get 3 out of 4 points.
Right.
And so we'll never get to the,
Right.
the highest level. It just means we need to be cognizant of it, and we are. We talk about it all the time about how much levy we have, and, I'm sorry, how much reserves we have, and if we were to increase them was, well, we'd either have to cut a program or levy more taxes.
I'm just saying, you need to be really on top of things and be a really good judge of estimating what's going to be happening in order to operate as lean as we do. I mean, I don't know how we could possibly be more responsible than we are. And some of that money you're talking about, some of that's interest.
Yeah, which we could move.
But wait, let's just stop. Let's just think about that for a minute. Through the course of, you look at what we went through with the recession, and there was actually money gained. That's wow. How great it is that there's actually there's even dollars there for us to even be talking about is really exceptional. And so I think that the work Mark's done here is to be celebrated, actually. The fact that we can even be having this discussion, and in terms of how we're operating fiscally, I mean, there's a reason why we pay for an audit to be done every year by an independent outside group who comes in once a year, reports out to us and to the public, and every time, and the CAFRA and every time it's exceptional. That this is a model for other school districts to follow, and so it's actually, I mean, this is going to happen. There's no way to make everybody happy all the time. There's always going to be people that are not going to be happy and think you ought to be doing something differently. But in my limited knowledge, I'm not an educator and I'm not a financial person, but I do sit here with some fiduciary responsibility to our community, and I can tell you that from what I've learned in my near 7 years now on this board, this guy is doing just a fantastic job. So I would hope that the rest of the board might join me in really congratulating Mark on the great work that he's done and his staff is doing.
No, there's a full team. There's not just me. There's a full team in the district.
You have our full, unflinching support in all the processes and procedures and the things that you're recommending to us. So I just wanted to get that out there because I took some personal offense to some comments that were made in emails.
Do we have any other questions for Mark?
Okay.
Okay, Mark, thank you for making something so complex so easy
Okay.
to understand. Thank you.
We should have him talk about PE exemptions next time.
Have we had any freedom of information requests?
We've had 3 that we have responded to.
Okay, we're going to move on to the consent agenda. Is there any item that any member of the board would like to withdraw from the consent agenda for further discussion? Hearing none, we need a motion to approve consent agenda 6A, personnel report, appointment certified, transfer of position classified, appointment classified. B, personnel report, retirement administration, retirement certified, resignation classified. C, personnel report, termination classified. D, the financial pages. E, approval of the 2018-19 amended calendar. And F, approval of student tour.
So moved. Beat you.
Go for it.
I beat you.
Go for it.
Mike?
Yes.
Mike moves and Terry seconds.
Thank you.
Mike Davenport,
Aye.
Rick Pavasich,
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Don Renner,
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller,
Aye.
Dan Nicholas,
Aye.
and Nancy Kupka.
Aye. Consent agenda passes. We'll move on now to the recommendation for action. Just because it's getting late, I would just remind everybody that we've already discussed all of these issues, so let's keep conversation down to the minimum. First, we need a recommendation to approve the 2018 summer school recommendations.
So moved.
Is there anything you wanted to add?
I'll second.
Now you can discuss it.
We have nothing more to add. We discussed it the last time. Recommendations have not changed, and we received no questions between the last time and this time.
Rick Pavasich,
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller,
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Rick Pavanato,
Aye.
Don Renner,
Aye.
and Nancy Kupka.
Aye, motion carries. Second is the approval of student fees for 2018 to 2019. Just to remind everyone, there's no increase in student fees. Was there anything else that we wanted to add?
Nothing has changed, or no questions have been received since the last time.
Okay, so do we have a motion?
I motion to approve the student fees for 2018-19.
I second.
Dan and Sherelle.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Sherelle Fuller,
Aye.
Ray Pavasich.
Aye.
Rick Cavanato.
Aye.
Don Renner.
Aye.
Mike Davenport.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, motion carries. And finally, the approval for the recommended textbooks to go on display that Gina went over a little bit earlier today.
So moved.
Mike? Who
Seconded.
Dan seconds.
Thank you. Mike Davenport.
Aye.
Dan Nicholas.
Aye.
Ray Pavasich.
Aye.
Rick Cavanato.
Aye.
Don Renner.
Aye.
Cheryl Fuller.
Aye.
And Nancy Kupka.
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. We'll move on to 9A, which is new business, the policy committee report, first reading.
So this is coming out of the policy committee meeting that happened earlier this month. Julie has done such a wonderful job of listing for you the policies and the ones that have really no changes, that are there just grammatically, those that have minor changes, and those that have substantial changes. These will return at the next board meeting for approval, so next month. Traditionally, we typically don't take a lot of questions at this time unless you needed something defined, but they're all there for you, and if you have questions, you could reach out to either Rick or Dan or Pete or I to discuss. We all sit on the policy committee, anything that's in here, and as I said, we'll probably bring those other two back at the next meeting as well.
I did have just one, it's actually, I thought the policies were great. I would at some point like to hear just like 5 minutes on our concussion and head injuries, because I know we've taken a lot of steps to try to avert those. You know how well we're doing. Sometime in the
We can
future.
bring something back on that.
And I'd be interested in knowing in terms of all of these, if there was any substantial conversation about one or two on the committee that you wanted to highlight for us.
No, I mean, the biggest one, as you know, the majority of these are press changes or, you know, grammar changes. The only one we discussed, I think we discussed for most of the policy committee, was the PE exemptions, and came to the decision that we couldn't make a decision in that small of a group. We needed to bring it to the larger group.
We
So
needed
that's
to
what
hear
we
your
did.
input.
Okay.
And we didn't get a chance to really discuss it on the first time around, so.
There wasn't much in here that, it was a lot of cleanup.
Yep.
There
Yeah.
wasn't much
Looked like
that was
it, but-
substantial in here. Julie did provide you kind of an overview of the ones that do have changes, what changed inside of it. But, yeah, this was really a lot of cleanup
Yeah.
this time.
Yeah.
Besides the PE exemption, there was really nothing interesting.
There were two or three that were highlighted that were administrative recommendations, so I just thought maybe there might have been a little more
There was
discussion on
two.
those things.
One
so.
is Scott's job description, which was really a title change, and then updating now that we've brought in the director level position underneath him to make sure we have the job descriptions clarified. And the other one is our instructional materials policy, which Rob Lang on Gina's team has been working on, and it really cleans up some of the language to come in line with press, but it also makes it so it works for digital materials and those kinds of things. So those were the key changes in that policy. Those were our two.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything else? Okay, this is the second reception of visitors, which is intended for audience members to address the board on any topic pertaining to Community High School District 99. Is there anybody who wishes to address the board? Hearing none, we'll move on to communications and announcements. Lend, excuse me.
We met last Friday. What Lend is working on right now is negotiating a new arrangement with our executive director, longtime executive director Peg Nagnos. She's getting closer towards retirement. We're changing the model from an employment-based to an independent contractor-basis. So the executive committee has been working on negotiating a new contract with her. We believe that the new contract will allow for a succession plan. We'll also save some money to the Lend Council, which hopefully will allow the Lend annual membership dues to eventually be decreased and/or build up reserves for Lend, because over the last few years, Lend's reserves have been depleting. So the executive committee is a little concerned about that. We cleaned up the intergovernmental agreement for Lend. I don't really have much to report from a legislative basis. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, legislatively, we're at that spot where there's a lot of shell bills and they're starting to just put stuff in. A lot of stuff moving to committees over the next few weeks. You've seen a huge increase, obviously, in school safety things in the last week. That's coming from a lot of different directions. Actually, dual credit is getting some traction, but not in the ways that we'd like it to. So they're not the substantial changes we're looking for, but at least it's a topic of discussion. There's the normal kind of finance and tax stuff that's being floated, but it's a lot of just the initial discussions right now. And as things come forward, I will always get it out to the board as we take notice of stuff that looks like it might actually take a hold.
Okay. Moving on, report on the School Association for Special Education in DuPage County. So I attended the February meeting. Pardon me, I got to look at my notes. Just of import, I thought was CSD is experiencing an increase in enrollment, especially in their alternative school. In fact, they're turning students away. They are trying to build out more facilities, and they are anticipating that they will have about a 2.5% increase on all services, average. I won't be attending the March meeting, but neither will my alternate, but we will have a report for the April meeting. The Education Foundation?
Yes, and I hope you all have purchased your tickets for Pizza Wars. It is this Thursday, the 1st, 5:30 to 8, and it is $10 online, $15 at the door, so it is a good opportunity to get it early.
And will there be a silent auction again?
No.
Okay.
And
will there be an a cappella group singing?
Yes, I believe it's the University of Indiana is up for a concert, and they're going to kind of recruit people, I guess, because their concert starts at 7:30, so in the auditorium. So they'll be singing and maybe enticing people to come to their concert. And that is a free concert, so, be sure and go to that too if you'd like. We're also still looking for volunteers. It's an opportunity to do some community service for District 99, so contact Julia Beckman if you would like to volunteer to be on our board. And teacher learning grants are still we're doing it on a quarterly basis rather than a yearly basis, and so the next group or opportunity is April 1st deadline. So any of the teachers would like to turn in a grant, be sure and have your department chair look at that first, and then the principal, and then it'll come to the foundation. So those are all the opportunities. But Pizza Wars, it's always a really fun event. And we have 9 vendors this year.
I have a question, Terry. If you purchased online, will they just have your name at the door?
Yes, it's kind of like a will call type situation. You just come in, give your name, and then they'll give you your booklet. You'll get a booklet, and you can mark off your pizzas.
Okay, thank you.
So it'll be fun. And like I said, we've got different vendors, a few of the same, but several new vendors. So it's worthwhile. You never know. You might find that pizza that you've always been dreaming of.
Hey.
It would be any pizza.
Any pizza.
I found my new favorite. Always a good time. Always a good time. Illinois Association of School Boards, Mike?
Spring divisional meeting a week from tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah.
Anything else anybody wants to bring up? Rick, did you want to? No? Okay.
No.
Upcoming board meetings, we will meet on March 5th here for a special workshop meeting at 7 p.m. and then again on March 19th, our regular business meeting at 7:30 p.m. This time, though, we will meet in the South High School Library. And if there's nothing else, we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Moves. Mike seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.